In today's Gospel reading, we read about two of the most famous of Jesus' miracles in the whole of the Bible, the feeding of the 5,000 and Jesus walking on the water. In all, there are 35 different recorded miracles of Jesus in the New Testament, although we are told by John at the end of his Gospel that Jesus did many other things as well, and if every one of them were written down, even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. Interestingly, the feeding of the 5,000 is the only miracle that appears in all four Gospels. I wonder where you stand on the whole question of miracles. Do you believe in each and every one of them literally, as told? Or do you subscribe to the modern way of thinking that tries to explain them in a more rational and logical way? So, for example, what really happened on that mountainside? Or was it a hill? With all those thousands of people, was that really they all had their own food with them, but they kept it quiet until one little boy came forward with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, and by so doing encouraged those around him to do the same. And gradually this charity spread throughout the crowd so that all were fed. The problem with this kind of interpretation is, where do you draw the line? Do you accept some of the miracles per se and come up with different explanations for others? On what do you base your reasoning for acceptance or rejection? And where does faith fit into all this? If faith is truly being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see, as stated in Hebrews, then surely we should accept the miracles at face value, no matter how fantastical they appear to the modern scientific mind, and just get on with it. The miracle of feeding the 5,000 has much to teach us today. Let's look at it in more detail. First of all, when Jesus asked Philip where could they buy a great amount of bread, he's really being a bit mischievous because he's testing Philip to see what he will say. Philip comes at the problem from a financial point of view, talking about how much it will all cost, and there's no way they've got enough to cover it. Whereas Jesus wants to teach him that financial resources are not the most important ones. The point is that we can limit what God does in us by assuming what is and is not possible. There may be something that as a church or as a circuit we want to do, but make the assumption it is impossible to achieve because the price is astronomical or the necessary skills are just not there. But we shouldn't let our estimate of what can't be done keep us from taking on the task, because God can achieve the miraculous. Secondly, what the passage makes clear is that when we see a need, we must attempt to meet it. Now, it will be very easy to get political here and give example after example of real needs in society not being properly met by governments because they are shelved ad infinitum for one reason or another, with the result of even more misery, poverty, and injustice. Here, the perceived and very real need is instantly met by Jesus' actions. It was as if he said to the disciples, "I've got this. Do as I say and watch what happens." Thirdly, the presence of a little boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish demonstrates that God can use anyone, whether they are young or old, to accomplish great things. Age is no barrier to Christ. Also, the boy gave what little he had, and it made all the difference. If we offer nothing to God, he will have nothing to use. but he can take what little we have and turn it into something great. And this leads us to the next point. Jesus takes what little we have and multiplies it greatly. He is able to multiply our efforts, our gifts, our offerings, our talents, and bring complete satisfaction to the deepest places of our souls. In Ephesians, Paul writes that Jesus is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. God gives to us God gives to us in abundance, as is evidenced in the amount of food that is left over after all have been satisfied. He takes whatever we can offer him in time, ability, or resources and multiplies its effectiveness beyond our wildest expectations. If you take the first step in making yourself available to God, he will show you how greatly you can be used to advance the work of his kingdom. Everyone has a part to play, no matter how great or small. As Jesus says, let nothing be wasted. Next, the Lord does not give us what we want, but gives us what we need. In our former lives, before we were born again, we might have desired the things of this world: money, fame, power, possessions, success. But God knows us better than we do ourselves and can see the bigger picture for our lives. He provides us with an abundance of his grace and makes us realize the true value of what is important and what is to be cherished. One of Barnsley's famous sons, James Hudson Taylor, was a great man of faith whose missionary efforts helped to open China to the gospel. Time and again he saw God do amazing things in the face of hopeless circumstances and murderous hostility. Reflecting on his experiences, he remarked this. He said, "There are 3 stages in any work attempted for God: impossible, difficult, done." This should be encouraging to us all, because there are many moments in our lives when we seem to be stuck at the impossible stage. Everything is just too difficult and daunting, and there appears to be no way forward. Let's take heart, because this impossibility may merely be stage 1 of a process of a mighty miracle that God will perform on your behalf. When it comes to the second miracle of Jesus walking on the water, which incidentally is mentioned in 3 of the 4 Gospels, we see the disciples stressed and probably extremely tired from what must have been a very trying day. They are in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, having rowed for up to 3.5 miles, when the weather turns nasty. It's dark. Have you noticed how things always seem worse at night? Jesus isn't with them, and the sea is rough and stormy. And even though they are seasoned fishermen, these sudden storms on the lake with very high waves could be very frightening. It's little wonder that they become terrified when they see a figure walking towards them on the water. Once they realize who it is, after hearing his voice, everything becomes calm and they reach the shore safely. The lesson is clear. We often face spiritual and emotional storms and feel tossed about like a small boat on a big lake. In spite of terrifying circumstances, if we trust our lives to Christ for his safekeeping, he will give us peace in any storm. Something else that occurs to me from this passage is to do with expectation. The disciples had already seen Jesus perform a miracle earlier with the feeding of all those thousands of people. Shouldn't they have been expecting something else to happen to keep them safe at sea? Faith is a mindset that expects God to act. When we act on this expectation, we can overcome our fears. There are three phases in this passage that I want to draw your attention to. First, we have the disciples without Jesus. Second, we have the disciples with Jesus, but they don't recognize him. And third, we have the disciples in the full knowledge that Jesus is with them. At what stage are the disciples at their happiest and safest? Not a difficult question. Without Jesus, life is merely a storm, a tempest uncontrollable. Seeing Jesus but not knowing who he is of no benefit. But knowing Jesus and his love for his people brings us peace. It is he who speaks into our lives and saying, "It is I, do not be afraid." The great I am, God himself, says, "I am, do not be afraid." Amen.